Welcome to Notes from the North with Kyle and Sam.
Welcome back to Notes from the North. Kyle and Sam here. And Kyle, a question for you. I think I know the answer to this, but did you watch any of the Pro Bowl yesterday? Is that something for you?
Zero.
Zero.
The only thing I've seen, it just was on Twitter this morning. Daniil Hunter doing okay in the tug of war, which if you've seen Daniil Hunter, you're probably not surprised that he does okay in a tug of war. That kind of makes sense, right?
That would be a daunting tug of war to get yourself involved in.
That's
I
that's right.
I know Aiden Hutchinson was
Yeah.
the real hero of that. I don't know, the NFC seemed to really have a nice strategy for that.
How long do you think we would you two, there are two of us combined against Daniil Hunter on the other side? How long do you think before he pulled us into that foam pit? Do you think we'd last even a second or two, or would we
I
just be like instantly tossed in?
I am more concerned about being launched over the foam pit
Don't
onto
even
the
hit the
other
foam.
platform.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
like I would hope they pull up just because otherwise I think we're getting
yeah,
like I don't want to be the front guy because I think you're landing right into that platform.
yeah. I kind of thought you'd be the front, like kind of like think like trench warfare.
Yeah,
We put you in front, kind of thing. The less valuable soldier. Here you are,
right.
and then I'll be in back, a little protected because I'm trying to operate the command
Yeah.
station,
I
and
can
we'll kind of go from
imagine
there.
I can imagine you're the guy that wraps the rope around himself three times and tucks it
Yeah,
in
that's right, exactly.
and
And that's where
then
you get the slingshot effects,
that would
right?
be the danger.
Because Hunter is a strong guy,
Yeah.
strong guy. So
Yeah, I still think if it was just one of those dudes against both of us that we still lose. So
be in big trouble. Yeah,
I think I'd rather well, I'd rather do a two against one just to avoid that launching effect. But
yeah. All right.
yeah, again, I'm in the similar
If
boat as
Daniil
you.
Hunter's listening, I think Sam and I we'd give it a try. Try it once. Might wear a helmet, but I'd try it once.
Try it
So if
once.
you're listening, Daniil Hunter, and you want to do a tug of war for Notes from the North, we'll do it.
I I would I like I'm trying to think of what I would wear. I'd probably wrap myself in some bubble wrap or something, or
Right.
maybe just an outfit, but
Yeah.
some hockey gear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, it would be fun to try.
It
Uh,
would be fun to try. Yeah. Okay.
so so yeah,
Did you have a broader point for the Pro Bowl games, or did you
no,
watch it, or
just kind of a chit chat. I only
Mhm.
watched what I saw, just the clips on Twitter.
Yeah.
Um, saw Dan Orlovsky. I don't know if you saw that he participated and got the highest score of all quarterbacks.
Oh,
Um,
did he? Okay. Well, I mean,
participated.
he is a quarterback, right?
He is.
He's like he's not right now currently, but he was. So I mean,
No.
but I guess tip of the cap to him.
Yeah. No, it's I think that those competitions you kind of see like it's just it doesn't match up in terms of like again these quarterbacks are not they're not thinking about hitting these little targets. Uh
Right. Right.
there's a lot of movement that's happening, and so I think it's interesting to see them participate in that. But
Hmm.
yeah. So anyways, I feel like the Pro Bowl is just this filler for leading into the Super Bowl. And
Precisely.
and like
Precisely.
I
Yeah.
think it feels like again this weekend actually in a lot of sports has been chance for All-Star again. The NHL had their All-Star
That's right.
weekend. The AHL for the American Hockey League also had their competition. The NFL obviously does the Pro Bowl. Maybe again, I think what we'll do today, we'll move into talking about some important dates as we move into the off season. The one thing I
Hmm.
realize is that you and we gave some playoff predictions before we started.
Hmm.
I don't know if you
Hmm.
remember how that went.
Oh
Uh,
man, my memory's so bad. Did I?
uh,
I think I picked the Niners to go all the way
you did
through,
have
didn't
the
I?
Niners and you had the
And
Bills.
oh, I did. Okay, sorry.
And
Okay, so I got half that. I was wrong with the Bills, obviously.
yeah, and I had taken the Chiefs and I had taken
Oh,
the 49ers.
I mean, it's
So,
like it's
uh,
okay, but it's also
anyways, we did have the advantage of seeing those first couple of games, but
yeah, right.
I don't know. If usually one of us is pretty good at this.
Yeah,
So
okay.
so you just if people
So
want
then,
to
what's your Super Bowl prediction then? Give
that's what I
your
was
give
gonna
your
say.
actual. Yeah, yeah. Okay, who
I,
you picking? You pick first.
I'm gonna pick the Chiefs. It,
course.
I
Yeah,
think
of course.
it feels, I don't know. I think it's the Taylor Swift effect.
All
But
right. Here we go.
I'm picking the Chiefs.
She's
That's the
she's even
football
showing up in
analysis
the
that
podcast.
you come in. Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't name 5 songs from Taylor Swift. I know she's popular.
Really?
I think the Grammys happened recently, and I think she did well. That's what BBC told me. Um, she seems to have figured out how to do well in her industry. I couldn't tell you much about in culture, but I don't know. I mean, Shake It Off, that's one. Something about being 22. But I kind of drop off from there. Okay, but
Really?
anyhow, Taylor Swift. How many times do you think Taylor Swift shows up on the game broadcast? So there's two predictions. Okay, how many times does she show up on the game broadcast? And then you pick the Chiefs to win. How many times does she show up on the screen? Taylor Swift.
So is it number of times? Because again, one of the things that I saw an article wrote about was just she's shown up a few times, but like no more than like 40 seconds at a time.
No, yeah, no, I'm not saying she's
Like
necessarily going to be like on the screen for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like, but just like flashing to
numbered.
her, kind of like the camera just kind of pans over. You see her for a moment, and then you're back to the game. How many times do you think?
Okay, so it's within the game? Because I was gonna say if the Chiefs win,
Post
she's
kickoff,
getting
kickoff, the final whistle. How many times?
a 4.
All right, put me at 6, coinciding with the touchdown. And give me the 49ers winning by a touchdown by 6. Okay.
Okay, okay.
So you got Chiefs winning. Did you have a score or margin? I got 32-26 for the
Oh, okay,
49ers.
interesting. You think it's gonna? I think it's gonna be lower scoring than that.
Okay.
But I'm gonna say 27-17.
27-17. Okay. 10-point win. All right. Okay, good enough. What do we do in this pod, Sam, apart from talking about
Yeah.
meaningless crap?
Well, I was thinking we could really go into a tangent here about talking about Taylor Swift songs. Because I was
Are
trying to
you a
go through
fan?
my
Do you
head.
like her music?
I like I went through a phase. Um,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
uh, and
Okay.
I was just trying to think about how many songs I could name, but again, I don't think that's what people checked in for. It's
Maybe.
more than
Who
5.
knows? More than 5.
Um,
Yeah. I don't think I could get to 5.
yeah. Well, so again, we had talked about at the start, move into some dates, and I think last episode that Kyle and I did together talked a little bit about off season and some of the
Yeah.
storylines around that. I know last week had a little bit of a poll, off season poll, just asking some questions again for those who didn't get a chance to do it yet or weren't listening. I'll throw it in the description again for people to take
Hmm.
a look at. You have to answer before the Super Bowl because one of the questions is about who wins the Super Bowl. Um,
Right. That's right.
so
Not as impressive as if you guess correctly afterwards.
yeah, just
Yeah.
you lose points for
Definitely
doing
do.
that.
Definitely do.
But as it pertains to the Vikings, Super Bowl is interesting, but they're not there. Spoiler alert, in case
Yep.
anyone's been holding off. Uh, so now, what is kind of the next date or next couple dates that Vikings fans are can be looking forward
Yeah.
to, thinking like, okay, there's some significance as it relates
Right.
to either the team or about those maybe incoming to the team.
Hmm.
Yeah, what are those next couple dates that you've got circle of
Yep.
these are things to look out for?
Okay. So February is obviously a major month because that's when the Super Bowl happens. Okay. However, you have things coming. Basically, the NFL is very smart, right? And you basically, so the Senior Bowl has already happened, and that was an important event for evaluating prospects. Lots already been written on that, including on Vikings territory and PTSD. So you can check out stuff there, right? But afterwards, you kind of that evaluation process continues, right? And kind of the different things you can do within the league continues. And as I was talking to Sam beforehand, one thing to really, really keep in mind is that the two see in the NFL draft. NFL teams have two primary ways of adding talent to their roster: signing free agents and the draft. It's not the only way. Like, you can sign UDFAs, you can trade for players. There are other ways to acquire talent, but these are kind of the main ways, right? The primary methods by which you put actual guys onto your roster who then play football for you. Okay. So Kwesi is going to basically be evaluating. He's currently evaluating the organization's resources. We've talked about money, draft picks, all that stuff, right? Trying to figure out how are we going to fill all our needs? What are the necessary areas that we need to address and fix? Okay, what does free agency have to offer, and what will that cost? What does the NFL draft have to offer, and what will that cost? And kind of wrapping that up. So those are kind of all kind of come together, Kwesi's minds in the approach to try to figure out how do we get this Vikings team better, more competitive. He's talked about dropping the rebuild from the competitive rebuild, right? So how do you actually just become perpetually competitive? Well, it's shoring up some of these weak spots, and so that's kind of through free agency and the draft. Primarily, these two things are walking hand in hand for the Vikings, just like with every other team. Um, you have to know the talent that's available in the draft before you go into free agency, right? You know what I mean? Because then that, if you know that there's an abundance of cheap edge rushers you feel confident you can get, you maybe don't splurge in the same way the free agents. But conversely, if you know that there's not much there and you don't think you can get one or two or three of those edge rushers, you might be more inclined to grab one or two from free agency, right? And so these two things are kind of always walking in tandem. Okay. That being said, February 20th, that's when teams can start slapping on the franchise tag for players. Obviously, it's not going to work out for either Kirk Cousins or Danielle Hunter. Okay, so those are the kind of the two main names that you'd think. Otherwise, there's no one really who's marching towards free agency who would get the franchise tag. And the Vikings historically have not used the tag very often at all. The last time being Anthony Harris, the safety, right? And that didn't work out super well. Okay, so there's going to be no franchise tag for the Vikings almost certainly. The implication is just simply, or the importance for the Vikings is just simply that some teams will use the franchise tag, and therefore some players will be taken off the market, so to speak, taken out of free agency, right? And therefore thinning certain positions, right? Whoever it happens to be, if Brian Burns gets the franchise tag, out of Carolina, that's one less edge rusher. Jalen Johnson is a CB1, like a 24-year-old CB1 in Chicago. It's a stud. Good chance the Bears put the franchise tag on, right? And so you just kind of keep an eye on these things as a way of understanding, what talent is available, what kind of talent's available, and kind of where is their depth and where is their now depleted depth as a result of losing potentially some of the top tier guys, right? Shortly thereafter, Sam, you're getting into the NFL Combine, which is an amazing, right? A lot of interviews, a lot of press conferences. Obviously, there's the athletic testing. Keep in mind, though, so that is a draft evaluation event. You're taking NFL draft prospects and you're kind of running them through various tests, right? Some intellectual, sometimes it's media based, like some of it's, obviously athletic, but like everyone in the NFL is there, right? Including agents, right? And so there's a lot of conversations that happen there. You're kind of sowing seeds, right? And you're kind of establishing that plan. And this is kind of how rumors happen and conversations begin. And this is kind of some of the beginning stages of some of these steps to, there's a good chance Kwesi Fomensa maybe talks with Mike McCartney not Mike McCarthy, the Dallas Cowboys coach, but Kirk Cousins' agent, Mike McCartney. Maybe they talk at the combine, right? And maybe that's where these things kind of get going. I mean, Cousins has consistently said that he has to wait to March for some of these things to kind of get going, right? Good chance that from February 27th to March 4th, maybe that's where the stuff gets going with Kirk Cousins. Maybe that's where the stuff gets going in earnest with Danielle Hunter. Right now for the Vikings, a lot of that stuff is taking place behind the scenes. They're figuring out their money. They're running through scenarios. They're evaluating the talent that's available, trying to determine the best way to proceed forward. So that's February, Sam. Major ones to keep in mind there. Franchise tag, February 20th. February 27th is the beginning of the combine. Those are two things for February. Does that all make sense?
Makes sense. Yeah. So again, it feels like it does feel as you're explaining that it's kind of an extension on what we're in a little bit of rumor season, but rumor season from legit
it's gonna get
people
jacked
rather
up,
than
though. It's gonna get really ramped up.
Right. And again, I think the sources of who the rumors are coming from is a little bit better. Like right now we've got you've got your classic
some dot connecting, maybe, people are speculating, connecting dots.
Yeah. Um,
But here you might have like actual league insiders and actual GMs and actual agents and people leaking stuff and like real. Not that everything comes to fruition or anything, but like you know, more substantial news and real
right.
rumor.
Okay. Uh, and then so again, that's the near future. Anything in the distant future that, or like beyond that, like I guess you move into
Yeah,
March, and
yeah. So
April.
March,
Lots happens in March and April.
exactly. Those are busy months, right? So March 11th is when the legal tampering period begins, right? That's where teams can verbally come to agreements with players and but not actually kind of consummate anything, not actually formally put pen to paper and finish a deal, right? The 13th, however, is when you can. So the 11th is when you can start having those conversations, and a lot of news breaks. You know what I mean? There's kind of waves of news, and then the 13th, there's a fresh wave because you're either substantiating, or in some cases, some deals are falling apart for whatever reason. Things just didn't work out, and so certain players come back onto the market, right? And then obviously not every player signed by the 13th, right? Obviously, there's kind of again these waves of free agency, right? And things going on. And so that kind of is kind of the big event that takes place in March. And then around that, you're going to see, not just new players added to the Vikings, but there's going to be probably press conferences and that kind of thing. And there's going to be hype and analysis and how does it fit and so on and so forth. And then you're kind of immediately dipping into, not immediately, but after a couple of weeks, then you're going to be dipping into the draft, which takes place from April 25th to 27th, right? So free agency, March 11th, 13th. Okay. I mean, the beginning, that is. Free agency is basically ongoing, right? But then the draft is a 3-day event. It actually has a set end date, 25th, 26th, 27th of April. And that's where the Vikings have 9 selections at present. Whether they use all 9, whether they package some to move up, or maybe they move down and take on more picks, whatever the case may be. I will say one point about the picks that's kind of interesting, at least if you kind of have an OCD mind like mine. Right now, the Vikings with Kwesi have made 16 selections. Okay, they've drafted 16 players across 2 drafts. Add 9, that's 25 players, right? And so in a 3-year span, Kwesi Ofmensa will have added 25 players via draft pick. Okay, if he runs through with these 9 selections. Uh, and again, this idea of this competitive rebuild, think about what he's done with those 16 selections so far, what kind of work he still needs to accomplish with these 9 selections, potentially more, potentially less, right? And you could, have around 25 or so players brought into your program um, who looks like a long-term select or, solution, right? Which one of these selections is actually going to stick around? And some have already left, been cut, been traded, right? Vidarian Lowe has been traded away. Asezi Onamio has been cut. Others will follow. But it's just kind of this ongoing process of kind of churning the roster and kind of refreshing and replenishing the talent that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is kind of intentionally doing, kind of shifting this roster into his own image. If they do those 9 selections, it will be 25 drafted players across 3 years, right? And try to see, he's made a real concerted effort to rebuild the secondary via draft, right? If I'm not mistaken, 5 of those 16 selections, I think, Sam, have gone towards the secondary. Yet Lewis Seen, Jay Ward, Caleb Evans, Makai Blackman, Andrew Booth Jr., 3 corners, 2 safeties, I believe. I might be forgetting someone. But even if it's just 5 of those 16, that's still quite quite an overhaul, right? Especially in the context of Josh Metellus being young, signing Byron Murphy, who was young, already having Cameron Bynum, right? So I just wonder if they kind of began this competitive rebuilding the defense. They began in the secondary. I wonder now if there's just shifts and some of that rebuild starts to be kind of very deliberate about the front 7, right? You've kind of grafted in Ivan Pace as an undrafted free agent, who was just a marvelous signing. But then from there, do they start making more concerted effort to bring in D linemen and DNs and this kind of thing? And they've already kind of started this again. It's not that they haven't signed or drafted players for these positions, but I just wonder if the emphasis will shift to the front 7. Sorry, but that's kind of a different tangent. The dates alone are there. March 11 to 13 for free agency, April 25 to 27 for the draft. Those are kind of the 2 major offseason events until you get to training camp. There's other things going on, obviously, but those are kind of like the 2 huge ones for sure.
Yeah. It is a fascinating experience. Like I compare this to hockey and understanding that like in the NHL you've got the draft before you've got free agency. And again, that draft
Hmm.
is different than free agency, but even as I look
Hmm.
at and as you're talking about this, it I guess like one of the things that goes through my mind is that it almost feels like it would be easier on teams to do the draft first, know what you're going to get, and then do the free agency.
Right.
But it's reversed, and I guess I'm sure there's a reason for doing it the way that they do it. Um, but it is interesting. It would be interesting to
Hmm.
see, like you said, with the Vikings. We're going to talk about them, what they decide to do in terms of okay, do they try and get a couple of bigger fish in free agency,
Yeah. Right.
and what positions are that, and then how does it impact the draft? Because as you're saying, you know what, you see these working together. And I think realistically, there's a couple positions that the Vikings are pretty solid on.
Yeah.
But you can make an argument for them taking a whole variety of
Yeah. That's right.
positions,
Yeah.
and for different reasons. Again, even if Kirk Cousins does come back, is a quarterback um,
Yeah.
something that you take one of your high selections on. Um, so it is interesting, but it like as you're talking, it's one of the thoughts that I have is just it is a bit more of a challenging exercise to go through that process of doing free agency first and then the draft second.
In a sense, yeah. And I think um, the common wisdom that you hear tossed around when folks talk about like NFL rationale, like front office, um, is that obviously you try to maybe bring in some marquee free agents and some great players, but I think a lot of the work at times, or at least the way it's explained, is that you kind of elevate the floor, right? And so you want to go into the draft not feeling like you absolutely need to draft a corner in the first round because you didn't you have no one, right? Like corners you have on your roster aren't very good. You didn't get anybody in free agency. We have to take a corner in the first or the second. I think in free agency, a lot of times you're trying to get obviously great players. You can't just exclusively get great players. And so you're trying to maybe, fill needs, raise the floor, raise the competition. And so that it's not outright disastrous if you don't reach for a corner in the opening round. And so the free agency in some ways allows you to draft better, hopefully, because you fill positions with at least solid players. And then you can hopefully go from there and be a bit more shrewd where yeah, you would really love to have another corner, but the corners who are available right now just aren't worth that pick. But the edge rusher who's there, man, is he ever? So we're taking the edge rusher and understanding that corner is not a disaster right now,
Yeah.
right? So there's
I,
some there's that strategy of that back and forth, right?
yeah, I guess it is like it's either way you end up doing like you can go different directions with that of
Yeah,
like there's and like as you're talking, I guess there's the advantage like similar to what you're sharing. I think one of the things that you always I get concerned at is when your team drafts uh by position rather than the best player
right.
available.
Has a
Um
team ever gotten in trouble doing that? Right?
yeah, maybe a couple of times.
Maybe a couple of times. Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
and so I think maybe from that rationale, it does make a lot of sense
Hmm.
where things
Hmm.
are at. So good,
Hmm.
good. Well, any other last thoughts around just where this team's at? Again, we'll wrap up here shortly. We'll have a bit of a Super Bowl recap next
Yeah,
week and do that. But again, anything else that you just kind of wanted to touch on, or I know there's
yeah,
definitely rumors out there about what the Vikings are doing, and
yeah,
the
right.
latest I saw last night was around seems like the Vikings are making a push to move into this top three, and um,
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe.
anything like that that you wanted to just kind of briefly mention?
Um, Congrats to Teddy Bridgewater, head coach of his high school team. Congratulations, Mr. Bridgewater. And I gotta say, I'm kind of pulling for Zim to get the DC spot in Dallas. Um, Through it all, I still kind of like Zim, and he's actually an amazing defensive coach. Like he will thrive as a DC. I believe, at least in terms of just like um being able to put together an excellent game plan. And I know we praise Flores a lot as just like blitzing wizard, and he is. But Zim's fastball is still pretty good. He can he's really, really sharp when it comes to putting together a defense, man. And so that's it. That's all I got. We'll
Yeah.
talk post Super Bowl and talk maybe more about kind of the Vikings maybe compare or not compare to, this champion, whoever it happens to be, and kind of see then and maybe as a way of kind of tying all these strains together of their resources, their money, and their picks, because it's significant dates coming up. Super Bowl just happened. Where do the Vikings kind of find themselves in this jumbled kind of mess of all this stuff going on, right? Otherwise, congratulations to Bridgewater, kind of pulling for Zim, kind of
Yeah.
pulling for Zim.
Echo both of those. So good. We'll hope everyone has a good week. Again, you can use the link in the description for that poll. And yeah, we'll be back next Monday after the Super Bowl. Take care, everyone. Have a great week. See you then. Bye.